Elliot Ashford stood abruptly in the VIP lounge, trembling. His hand clutched his thigh as his breath came in short, uneven gasps. Below him, a woman danced under red lights, her body moving with a grace that had just shattered 3 years of silence inside him. His voice cracked across the club, raw and desperate. "Bring me that woman. Now." The music didn't stop, but everything else did. Conversations died. Heads turned. Security froze mid-step. Elliot Ashford was a man who controlled empires. Boardrooms bent to his will. Competitors feared his name. He built fortunes with a single signature and destroyed careers with a single word. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, he couldn't control his own body. 2 hours earlier, Elliot had closed a $200 million deal and felt nothing. His assistant suggested celebrating at the club Elliot secretly owned. He'd agreed out of habit. Celebration required feeling something, and he hadn't felt anything in years. The VIP lounge overlooked the main floor, dim and private. Music pulsed through the space. Women danced on raised platforms, their movements designed to captivate. Elliot sat with a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched, watching without seeing. And then she walked onto the stage. She wasn't like the others. She didn't perform for attention or approval. She moved, like the music lived inside her, every spin and arch effortless and controlled. Her skin glowed under the lights. Her body was strong, graceful, elegant, not desperate for eyes, but impossible to look away from. Elliot's gaze locked on her, and then it happened. A slow, aching pull low in his body, heat spreading through him, pressure building where there had been nothing but emptiness for 3 years. His manhood stirred. Pain followed sharp and unfamiliar. His hand shot to his thigh as his breath hitched. For a moment, he thought he was imagining it, some cruel trick of his broken mind. But no, his body was responding, fully, powerfully, impossibly. He'd been poisoned 3 years ago. The doctors had saved his life, but they couldn't save everything. Since that night, he'd been dead below the waist. Numb, broken. Every specialist had told him the same thing. The damage was permanent. He would never recover. He'd accepted it, buried the shame, built walls so high no one dared ask, until now. His chest heaved as he stared at her, terrified and exhilarated. She spun again, her hair catching the light, and the sensation intensified. He couldn't lose this. He couldn't let her disappear. His voice tore out of him before he could stop it. "Bring me that woman. Now." On the floor below, Sophia Carter froze mid-step. She'd been dancing for hours, letting the music drown out the noise in her head. This job wasn't her dream, teaching yoga was, but it paid her bills while she saved for her own studio. A guard appeared beside the stage, gesturing for her to come down. She frowned and kept moving. She didn't stop for requests. She wasn't a toy to be summoned. Then a voice boomed across the club, cutting through the music like a blade. "Everyone, back off. She is mine tonight." Sophia's head snapped up. A man stood at the edge of the VIP balcony, staring down at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Dark suit, sharp jaw, eyes that burned. The crowd parted instantly. No one argued, no one questioned. Her boss appeared from the side, pale and nervous. "Sophia, VIP room. Now." She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him to go to hell, but she saw the fear in her boss's eyes, and she knew, whoever this man was, he had power, the kind that could ruin her. She exhaled slowly and followed the guard upstairs. The VIP room was dimly lit, lined with black leather and floor-to-ceiling windows. The door clicked shut behind her, and suddenly the noise of the club felt very far away. Elliot stood near the bar, his back to her, hands gripping the edge like he was holding himself together. He turned. His eyes traced her face, her shoulders, her body not lustful, but desperate, like she was oxygen, and he'd been drowning. "What's your name?" His voice was quieter now, but still rough around the edges. "Sophia. What do you do? Besides this?" "I teach yoga." He nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "Are you in a relationship?" Her jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." "Answer me." "No," she said sharply. "I just got out of a 5-year relationship. I'm not looking for anything." Something ugly twisted in his expression. Jealousy, possessiveness, need. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook, scrawled something quickly, tore it off and held it out. $10,000. 1 night. With me. Sophia stared at the check, then at him, and she didn't hesitate. "No." He blinked, stunned, like the word didn't compute. No? No. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. Do you know who I am? She met his eyes without flinching. I don't care who you are. My body is not for sale. She turned toward the door, and that's when he moved. He caught her wrist, not rough, but trembling, his fingers wrapped around hers, and she felt the shake in his hand. Wait. Please. She stopped but didn't turn around. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. No one has ever said no to me, and I can't stop thinking about why that makes me want you more. He leaned in and pressed his lips to her temple, gentle, desperate, reverent. Then he let her go. Sophia stood frozen for a heartbeat, her pulse racing. Then she walked out without looking back. Elliot stood alone in the VIP room, his chest heaving, his hands still shaking. Stephen appeared in the doorway, cautious. Sir. Elliot's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a command. No one rejects me. Find out everything about her. Stephen nodded and disappeared. Elliot sank into the chair, staring at the door she'd walked through. For the first time in 3 years, he felt alive. And for the first time in his life, he'd been told no. He was already obsessed. For 3 days, Elliot didn't sleep. He watched security footage of Sophia on repeat, her face, her movements, the way she smiled at nothing. Every time he watched, his body responded, not powerfully, but enough to remind him what it felt like to be alive. Enough to make him ache. He skipped board meetings, ignored calls from investors, cancelled dinners with politicians and CEOs. Nothing mattered, except the next time she would dance. Stephen entered quietly one evening, carrying a tablet. Sir, the quarterly reports need your signature. Elliot didn't look up from the screen. Later, Stephen hesitated. He'd worked for Elliot Ashford for 7 years. He'd seen him ruthless, cold, calculating, but he'd never seen him like this. Sir, may I speak freely? Elliot's jaw tightened, but he nodded. You haven't left this office in 2 days. You're not eating. You're not sleeping. This woman is none of your concern. Stephen set the tablet down carefully. With respect, sir, she is my concern if she's affecting your ability to function. Elliot finally looked at him, and Stephen took an involuntary step back. There was something feral in his eyes, something desperate. Find out everything about her. Stephen exhaled slowly. I already have. He pulled up a file on the tablet and slid it across the desk. Her name is Sophia Carter, 25 years old, teaches yoga at a small rented studio downtown, lives in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, recently ended a 5-year relationship, no criminal record, no debts beyond standard rent and bills. She's ordinary, sir. Elliot stared at the photo on the file. A candid shot, probably from social media. She was laughing, mid-pose in a yoga class, sunlight streaming through the windows behind her. She looked happy. She's not ordinary, Elliot whispered. Stephen said nothing. Elliot's voice hardened. No more VIP requests for Sophia. No private rooms. No one touches her. If anyone tries, blacklist them immediately. Sir, she's not your employee. You can't. I own the club, Stephen. I can do whatever I want. Stephen nodded slowly and left. Elliot returned to the footage, his fingers trembling on the mouse. He didn't just want her. He needed her. Needed to know if that night had been real or some cruel hallucination his broken body had conjured. But she'd said no, and that refusal burned hotter than any desire. 3 nights later, Elliot sent an anonymous envelope, cash, and a note asking for dinner. That night, he watched from the VIP lounge as Sophia opened it, read it, and placed it back on the counter untouched. Elliot's hands curled into fists. Stephen appeared beside him, cautious. She refused again, sir. I can see that. Perhaps it's time to... No. Elliot's voice was low and dangerous. If she won't come willingly, I'll remove her from the place that keeps her away from me. Stephen's eyes widened. Sir, you can't. Call the club manager. Now. 10 minutes later, the manager stood in front of Elliot's desk, pale and sweating. Mr. Ashford, I didn't expect. Fire Sophia Carter. The manager blinked. I'm sorry, what? You heard me. Effective immediately. But sir, she's one of our best. Elliot's gaze cut through him like a blade. Do I need to repeat myself? The manager swallowed hard. No, sir. Good. And make sure she knows why. The manager hesitated. You want me to tell her that she offended the wrong person? Nothing more. The manager nodded and left quickly. Elliot leaned back in his chair, his chest tight. It wasn't revenge. It was strategy. If she wouldn't see him willingly, he'd force her hand. She'd come looking for answers, and when she did, he'd be ready. 2 days later, Sophia was wiping down mats after her yoga class when her phone buzzed. A text from her boss at the club. "Need to see you. Come in before your shift." Her stomach dropped. She'd never been summoned like this before. That evening, she arrived at the club early and was directed to the manager's office. He sat behind his desk, avoiding her eyes. "Sophia, sit down." She didn't. "What's going on?" He sighed heavily. "Management says your services are no longer needed." The words hit her like a punch. "What? Why? I've never missed a shift. I'm always on time." You offended the wrong person." Sophia's blood went cold. "Who?" The manager finally looked at her, and she saw it fear. "I can't say." "I'm sorry, Sophia." This came from the top. Her mind raced back to that night. The VIP room. The man who'd tried to buy her. The man whose touch still lingered on her temple. It was him, wasn't it? The manager said nothing. Sophia's hands shook as rage and terror warred inside her. "I said no. That's it. I said no. And he's punishing me for it. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You're all cowards." She stormed out into the cold night, her chest heaving. The city lights blurred as her eyes burned with unshed tears. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Her yoga studio fees were already piling up. She'd been barely scraping by as it was, and now she had nothing. All because some entitled billionaire couldn't handle rejection. Sophia pulled her coat tighter and walked faster, her breath clouding in the frigid air. She didn't know his name, didn't know where he lived or how to find him, but she would, and when she did, she'd make sure he understood exactly what he'd done. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the small rented studio space where she taught yoga. It wasn't much, a converted loft with hardwood floors, large windows, and barely enough room for 10 mats. But it was hers, or at least, it felt like hers. She dreamed of owning her own studio one day, a real space with her name on the door. But right now, she was just trying to survive. She lit candles, cued soft instrumental music, and laid out mats for her morning class. Her regulars filtered in familiar faces, people who came for peace and clarity. She needed that peace today. Needed to forget about bills and unemployment, and the man who'd ruined her life because she'd said no. "All right, everyone. Let's start with some breathing exercises." She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, guiding her students through the motions. "Breathe in. Let go of whatever weight you're carrying. Breathe out." The room settled into calm, and then the door opened. Sophia's eyes snapped open. Her students turned their heads. Elliot Ashford stood in the doorway, still in a dark, tailored suit, completely out of place among the yoga mats and soft lighting. His eyes locked on her immediately, ignoring everyone else. Sophia's chest tightened. Her breath caught. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Class is full." He stepped inside anyway, closing the door softly behind him. "I don't need a mat." His voice was low, raw, stripped of the commanding edge he'd had in the club. "I need you." The room went silent. Every pair of eyes shifted between them. Whispers started. Sophia felt heat crawl up her neck, humiliation mixed with anger. "If you could wait outside," she said tightly. "I'll speak with you after class." Elliot didn't move for a long moment, just stood there, staring at her like she was the only person in the world. Finally, he nodded once. "I'll wait." He left. Sophia exhaled shakily and turned back to her students, but her hands were trembling. She forced herself to finish the class, hands trembling. When the last student left, she grabbed Elliot and dragged him to the corner. "You got me fired," she hissed, her voice shaking with fury. "Are you insane?" He didn't flinch, didn't defend himself. He just looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something other than control in his eyes. He looked broken. "You woke something in me I thought was dead." His voice cracked. "For 3 years, my body was a corpse. I couldn't feel anything, couldn't respond to anyone. Doctors said I'd never recover. And then you danced once, and everything changed. You touched nothing, but just by existing, you gave me hope." He stepped closer, his eyes burning. "Don't expect me to act sane." Sophia stared at him, her chest heaving. "Your hope is not my responsibility," she said, her voice sharp. "I'm not your medicine." The words hit him like a blade. She saw it in his face, the way he flinched, the way his jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he might snap, might explode the way powerful men always did when they didn't get what they wanted. But instead, he softened, His shoulders dropped. His voice fell to a whisper. "You're right. It's not fair. None of this is fair." He took a breath, his hands shaking at his sides. "Give me one chance. Not for a night. Not for $10,000. One chance to prove I'm more than a monster who ruined your job." Sophia wanted to say no, wanted to scream at him and tell him to get out of her life. But something in his voice stopped her. "No," she said quietly. But it came out weaker than before, less certain, because she was scared, not of him, but of how intense he was, of how much he seemed to need her, and of the part of her that wanted to say yes. Sophia tried to move on. She threw herself into her yoga classes, into rebuilding her savings, into anything that didn't involve thinking about the man who'd turned her life upside down. And then she met Adrian. He'd come into her class one afternoon, charming, easy smile, completely non-threatening. After the session, he'd asked if she wanted to grab coffee sometime. No pressure, no intensity, just coffee. She'd said yes. A week later, she sat across from her best friend Maya at a small brunch spot, stirring her latte absently. "So, I'm seeing someone, kind of." Maya's eyebrows shot up. "Kind of? It's not serious. We're just talking. His name is Adrian. He's nice." "Normal." "Normal sounds good after what you've been through." Sophia nodded, but something in her chest felt tight. "Yeah, I'm just trying to move on." Maya studied her. "From the 5-year relationship? Or from someone else?" Sophia didn't answer. That evening, she met Adrian at a quiet cafe downtown. He was already there when she arrived, standing to pull out her chair with a warm smile. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." They ordered drinks, and Adrian leaned forward, genuinely interested. "So tell me more about this yoga studio dream. You said you want to own your own space." Sophia relaxed slightly. "Yeah, I've been teaching for years, but I'm renting right now. I want something that's mine, a place where people feel safe." "That's amazing. You'd be great at it." He didn't push, didn't pry, just listened. And for the first time in weeks, Sophia felt like she could breathe. Across the street, Elliot Ashford sat in the back of a black town car, his hands gripping the leather seat so hard his knuckles turned white. He'd been following her for days. Not physically, he wasn't a stalker, but Stephen had been keeping tabs, reporting her movements, her routines. And tonight, Stephen had mentioned a cafe, a man. Elliot had come to see for himself. Now he watched through tinted windows as Sophia laughed at something the man said. Watched as the man leaned closer, his expression warm and easy. Elliot's jaw clenched. "Who is he?" he growled. Stephen sat in the front seat, tablet in hand. He hesitated. "Adrian Miles, businessman, mid-30s, clean record. I didn't ask for his resume. Who is he to me?" Stephen's voice dropped. "One of your biggest rivals on the board. He's been trying to acquire the Midtown property you outbid him on last quarter." Elliot's eyes darkened. His breath came faster. Of all men, she had to pick him to smile with. Inside the cafe, Adrian reached across the table and gently touched Sophia's hand. That was it. Elliot shoved the car door open and stepped onto the street, his suit sharp, his expression deadly. He crossed the street in long strides and pushed through the cafe door. The air seemed to freeze. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Elliot walked straight to their table and stopped beside it, towering over them both. Adrian looked up, his smile fading. Sophia's eyes went wide. "You're leaving," Elliot said flatly, his gaze locked on Adrian. "Now." Adrian leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Excuse me? You heard me." Adrian's smirk widened. "Last time I checked, she's not wearing your ring." Sophia's face burned. "Elliot, what are you?" Elliot's gaze snapped to her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Are you coming?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Or do I have to remind him whose name is on the building he's trying to buy?" Adrian's smirk vanished. Sophia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She grabbed her bag, her hands shaking with fury. "I'm leaving," she said tightly. "But not with you." She stormed toward the door. Elliot followed. Adrian stood, his voice sharp. "You can't just—" Elliot turned, his voice cold as ice. "Stay away from her. That's not a request." Then he walked out after Sophia. She was halfway down the block when he caught up to her. "Sophia, don't." She spun on him, her eyes blazing. "Don't you dare. He's not right for you." "And you are?" She laughed bitterly. "You got me fired. You stalked me. You just humiliated me in public. What part of that makes you think you have any say in my life? He's my rival, Elliot said, his voice cracking. He's using you to get to me. Everything is not about you. Her voice echoed down the street. Elliot stood frozen, his chest heaving. Sophia's voice dropped, shaking. I need you to leave me alone. She turned and walked away. This time, he didn't follow. The next evening, Sophia was locking up her yoga studio when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned sharply, her heart racing. Elliot stood in the doorway, but he looked different. His suit was wrinkled, his tie was loose, his eyes were red-rimmed, like he hadn't slept. I'm calling the police, she said coldly. I deserve that. He stepped inside slowly, his hands raised slightly, non-threatening. I came to tell you the truth, and then I'll leave. I swear. Sophia crossed her arms, her jaw tight. You have 2 minutes. He exhaled shakily. I have a condition. 3 years ago, I was poisoned. They never found out who did it. The doctors saved my life, but they couldn't save everything. His voice cracked. For 3 years, I couldn't be a man. My body didn't respond to anything, to anyone. I tried everything, doctors, specialists, therapies. Nothing worked. They told me it was permanent. He looked at her, his eyes raw and desperate. Then you danced. And for the first time in 3 years, my body woke up. You're the only woman who's ever made me feel alive again. Sophia's throat tightened, but her voice stayed hard. That's not my job to fix. The words hit him like a slap. He flinched, his shoulders dropping. You're right, he whispered. It's not. He turned toward the door. I'm sorry. For everything. And he left. Sophia stood alone in the empty studio, her hands trembling. She wanted to hate him, but all she felt was confusion. That night, Elliot sat alone in his penthouse office, staring at nothing. Her words replayed over and over. That's not my job to fix. She was right. She didn't owe him anything, but he couldn't let her go. He made a decision. If she wouldn't let him into her life, he'd give her a life she couldn't refuse. The next morning, Sophia arrived at her studio with a knot in her stomach. Rent was overdue. She'd been dodging her landlord's calls for 3 days. When she unlocked the door, she froze. Her landlord stood in the center of the room with a sleek woman in a tailored suit, clipboard in hand. Sophia, good, you're here. Her heart sank. I know I'm late on rent. I just need a few more days. It's not about rent. He shifted uncomfortably. We've sold the building. You'll need to vacate within 30 days. The words hit her like a freight train. What? You can't? I'm sorry. The offer was too good to pass up. Sophia's chest tightened. Panic clawed at her throat. This space was all she had left. Her dream, her stability. Who bought it? Before he could answer, footsteps echoed behind her. She turned. Stephen stood in the doorway, holding a leather folder. No. Miss Carter, Stephen said evenly. This building is now yours. Sophia's breath stopped. What? He stepped forward and opened the folder, revealing a property deed. Her name was printed across the top in bold letters. The building has been purchased in full and transferred to your name. No mortgage, no liens. It's yours. Her hands shook as she stared at the document. This isn't possible. It's very possible. Elliot's voice came from the doorway. She spun around. He stood there quietly, his suit perfectly pressed, but his eyes looked tired, vulnerable. You, she whispered. He stepped inside, his gaze never leaving hers. You said your dream was to own a studio. You can't just... I'm not trying to fix my body with you. Sophia. His voice was soft, almost pleading. I just want a reason to see you grow. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. You can't buy me. He took a slow breath. I didn't buy you, he said quietly. I bought your freedom. The words hung in the air. Sophia stared at him, her walls cracking despite every instinct telling her to push him away. This wasn't control. It wasn't manipulation. It was desperation wrapped in hope. She looked down at the deed in her hands. Her name, her studio, her future, handed to her by a man she'd rejected twice. Why? She whispered. Because you deserve it. And because I need you to know I see you. Not as a cure, not as a possession, as someone who deserves everything she's worked for. Her throat tightened. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. One chance, she said finally, her voice barely audible. That's all you get. Relief flooded his face. He stepped closer, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek, and then he kissed her. deeply, hungrily, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks and she was oxygen. Sophia's hands found his chest, and for a moment she let herself fall into it. Behind them, a few early clients stood frozen in the doorway, staring in shock. Elliot didn't care. Neither did she. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he whispered. Sophia closed her eyes. She didn't know if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, but for the first time in weeks, she felt something other than fear. She felt possibility. They agreed to take it slow. A simple dinner, no grand gestures, no power plays. Just two people trying to figure out if there was something real between them. Elliot picked her up in a sleek black car, but he opened the door himself. No driver, no Stephen hovering in the background. "No pressure," he said as she slid into the passenger seat. "No deals, no checks, just, let me be a man with you." Sophia studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." The restaurant was intimate, low lighting, quiet music, tucked away from the noise of the city. But as they drove, the chemistry between them became impossible to ignore. He kept glancing at her, her lips, the way her hands rested in her lap, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. She felt his gaze like a physical touch, and every time their eyes met, the air grew heavier. Halfway to the restaurant, the sky opened up. Rain pounded against the windshield, turning the streets into rivers. Thunder cracked overhead. Elliot pulled into the parking lot of an upscale hotel. "We'll wait it out," he said quietly. Sophia nodded, but her pulse quickened. They stepped into the lobby, both soaked despite the short dash from the car. The concierge offered them a room to freshen up, and Elliot accepted without hesitation. The room was elegant, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the storm, soft lighting, a king-sized bed dominating the space. Sophia stood by the window, watching the rain, her arms crossed. Elliot stood near the door, his jacket dripping, his eyes locked on her. "Sophia," she turned. The distance between them felt impossible to maintain. He crossed the room slowly, stopping just in front of her. "If you want to leave, we'll leave." She didn't move. He reached up, gently brushing a wet strand of hair from her face, and then she kissed him. It wasn't soft, it wasn't hesitant, it was desperate. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, her fingers tangled in his hair. The kiss deepened, turning into something neither of them could control. He lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around him as he carried her to the bed. Clothes came off slowly, deliberately. Every touch was reverent. Every kiss was a question she answered with her body. But as they lay together, his hands trembling against her skin, she saw it, the fear in his eyes. "Elliot." He stopped, his breath ragged. "What if?" His voice cracked. "What if it doesn't work?" She cupped his face. "You don't have to prove anything." "I do. To myself." She kissed him softly. "Then, let me help you." His body responded fully, powerfully. They made love slowly at first, then desperately. When it was over, they lay tangled together, their breathing heavy, the rain still pounding against the windows. And then Elliot broke. Actual tears slipped down his face. Sophia froze, her hand on his chest. "Elliot? You don't understand," he whispered, his voice thick. "You gave me back my manhood, my confidence, my life." She pulled him closer, holding him as he shook. "I thought I was broken forever," he said through tears. "And you made me whole again." Sophia didn't speak. She just held him, her own chest tight with emotion. For the first time, she saw him not as a billionaire or a force of nature, but as a man who'd been terrified he'd never feel alive again. The next few days were tentative but hopeful. Elliot gave her space, didn't push, didn't show up unannounced. He texted her good morning, asked how her classes went, sent her pictures of things that made him think of her: a sunrise, a quote, a flower growing through concrete. Sophia found herself smiling at her phone more than she wanted to admit. But then Adrian started texting again. At first, it was casual. "Hope you're doing well." Then it escalated. "I can't stop thinking about you. I regret not asking you out sooner. He's dangerous, Sophia. Let me protect you." She ignored most of them, but one evening, while she was with Elliot at his penthouse, her phone buzzed on the table. Elliot glanced at the screen. Adrian's name lit up. His entire body went rigid. "Who is he to you?" His voice was low, controlled, but she heard the edge beneath it. "Nothing. We went on one date before you." "Before I what? Before I made it clear you're mine?" Sophia stood, her jaw tight. I'm not yours, Elliot. I'm choosing to be here. That's different. He exhaled sharply and nodded. You're right. I'm sorry. But she saw it in his eyes, the jealousy, the possession, the barely contained rage. 2 days later, Elliot was in a boardroom meeting when Adrian walked in. The tension was immediate. Halfway through, Adrian leaned back, smirking. I hear congratulations are in order. Finally found a woman who can wake up old men. The room went silent. Elliot's jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists on the table. Say that again. Adrian's smirk widened. You heard me. Elliot stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Outside. Now. Adrian stood too, unfazed. Gladly. They nearly came to blows in the hallway before colleagues pulled them apart, shouting and threatening lawyers. Word spread fast. That night, Sophia showed up at Elliot's penthouse, fury radiating off her. What the hell is wrong with you? He turned from the window, still dressed in his suit, tie loosened, hair disheveled. He disrespected you. He disrespected you, and you let him bait you like a child. I told him to stay away from what's mine. I am not an object you mark as yours, Elliot. Her voice echoed through the penthouse. He stared at her, breathing hard. You're right, he said finally, his voice breaking. You're not an object, but I can't. He ran a hand through his hair. I can't stand the thought of losing you. Then stop acting like you own me, because if you don't control that temper, you'll lose me easily. Fear crashed into him. I'll fix it, he said desperately. Therapy, anger management, whatever it takes. Just don't walk away. Sophia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Adrian. I heard about the studio. Congratulations. She stared at the message, then looked at Elliot. I need to make a call. She stepped into the hallway and dialed Adrian's number. He answered on the first ring. Sophia, I can't do this, Adrian. Silence. I know we're done, he said quietly. But I meant what I said. You deserve someone who sees you, not someone who needs you to survive. Her throat tightened. If he ever hurts you, you have my number. Her voice softened. Thank you, but I'm choosing this. Then I hope he's worth it. He hung up. Sophia stood there for a moment, then walked back inside. Elliot was watching her, his expression unreadable. What did he say? That you better be worth it. Elliot's eyes glistened. I will be, he whispered. I swear I will be. Sophia crossed the room and took his hand. Then prove it. Over the next few weeks, Elliot changed. He stopped tracking Adrian, stopped issuing threats, stopped letting jealousy dictate his every move. Instead, he showed up. One morning, Sophia arrived at her studio to find him sitting quietly in the back of her class. Mat laid out, suit traded for simple athletic wear. She froze mid-instruction. Elliot? He smiled softly. You said I could have one chance. I'm taking it seriously. Her students stared. She tried to hide her smile and failed. He didn't disrupt, didn't draw attention to himself, just followed her instructions, clumsy and earnest, like any other student. After class, he stayed to help fold mats. You're terrible at downward dog, she teased. I'm terrible at a lot of things, but I'm trying. She saw it then, the effort, the restraint, the man beneath the empire. Gifts started arriving at her studio, but they were different now. Not jewelry, not extravagant displays. A new set of mirrors for the wall, high-quality yoga mats, a sound system for her classes, a small plaque engraved with her name for the front door. Functional, thoughtful, things that helped her dream grow. She called him one evening. You don't have to keep doing this. I know, he said quietly, but I want to. Not to buy you, to support you. She didn't know what to say. Thank you, she whispered. 3 weeks later, Elliot picked her up, without explanation. Where are we going? You'll see. He drove her to a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, tree-lined streets, small gardens, the kind of place that felt like home. He parked in front of a beautiful 2-story house with large windows and a wraparound porch. Sophia's breath caught. Elliot. He turned to her, his expression serious. I bought this. But before you say anything, I need you to understand something. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it to her. She opened it. The deed. Her name. If this feels like control, he said carefully, I'll tear the papers right now. If it feels like safety, it's yours. No conditions, no strings, just a place where you can breathe. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. Why? Because you deserve a home, not a rented apartment where the landlord can kick you out, not uncertainty, stability, peace. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle. I'm not trying to buy you, Sophia. I'm trying to show you that I see the life you're building, and I want to be part of it not by controlling it, but by protecting it. She stared at the deed, her hands trembling. For the first time, she didn't feel bought. She felt chosen, protected, seen. Okay, she whispered. His eyes widened. Okay, I'll take it, but on one condition. Anything. You let me paint the living room whatever color I want. He laughed, a real unguarded laugh, and pulled her into his arms. Deal. She buried her face in his chest, and for the first time in months, she felt safe. Not because he'd bought her something, but because he'd given her a choice. 3 months later, they returned to the restaurant they'd missed because of the storm. This time, there were no interruptions. She told him she was proud of him, but as dessert arrived, she noticed something. He was nervous. Elliot Ashford, the man who commanded boardrooms, who closed billion-dollar deals without flinching, was fidgeting with his napkin. Are you okay? He looked up, his eyes intense. I need to ask you something. Her heart skipped. He stood slowly, and her breath caught as he moved around the table. A few nearby diners noticed. Whispers started. Elliot knelt in front of her, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket. Sophia's hands flew to her mouth. Sophia Carter, he began, his voice steady but raw with emotion. You were my cure. But you were so much more than that. His eyes glistened. You were the woman who forced me to feel again. For 3 years, I was feared, respected, untouchable, and completely dead inside. I had everything, and felt nothing. He opened the box. A stunning ring, simple, elegant, perfect. You brought me back to life, not because of what your presence did to my body, but because of who you are, your strength, your refusal to be owned, your ability to see past the monster everyone else fears and demand I be better. A tear slipped down Sophia's cheek. Marry me, Sophia. Let me spend the rest of my life proving you're not an acquisition. You're not a cure. You're my miracle. The restaurant had gone quiet. A few people watched from nearby tables, some with phones raised. Sophia looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the ruthless billionaire who'd gotten her fired, the broken man who'd cried in her arms, the desperate soul who'd bought her studio just to stay in her life, the patient man who'd attended her yoga classes and sent her thoughtful gifts. She saw every version of him, and she loved all of them. Yes, she whispered. His face broke into the most genuine smile she'd ever seen. He slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply as the restaurant erupted in applause. But Sophia barely heard it. All she felt was him. That night, they went back to the house he'd given her, the home that was truly theirs now. He carried her across the threshold, and she laughed, breathless and radiant. You know that's supposed to happen after the wedding. I don't care about tradition, he murmured against her lips. I care about you. They moved through the house, shedding clothes, trading kisses that grew more desperate with each step. But when they finally came together, it was different. There was still possession, still that primal need to claim her, but beneath it was something deeper, reverence. He worshipped her body with slow, deliberate touches, kissed every inch of her skin like she was sacred, whispered her name like a prayer. And when they finally moved together,